Let's imagine you share a house with an older sibling who makes all the rules. They take your things, dictate your schedule, and do whatever they please, simply because they are bigger. You have no recourse, no boundaries to point to, and no way to defend yourself. The only way out of that dynamic is to establish a set of unbreakable rules. This is the essence of the rule of law, the principle that no individual is above the system, and every action carries a defined consequence. For nearly 2 centuries, Native Indians lived under a political older sibling. British administrative acts prioritized imperial extraction and colonial control, offering no legal recognition of fundamental rights for Indian subjects. Waiting for an empire to pack up and leave does not guarantee freedom. A truly independent society has to engineer its own boundaries and protections from scratch to ensure that unchecked tyranny can never take root again. By the 1930s, Indian political leaders realized that merely taking over the British administrative machinery would be a failure. They needed to tear down the imperial legal framework and build a native one. Thinkers like M.N. Roy first proposed the idea in 1934, and figures like Jawaharlal Nehru amplified it. They formally demanded a dedicated political body tasked solely with writing the nation's new laws. They called this a Constituent Assembly, composed entirely of Indians, elected by Indians, and free from British interference. Asking for this room to be built was a direct challenge to the Crown. It was a colonized population declaring that they, and only they, possessed the authority to dictate their own political destiny. Following the devastation of World War II, the British economy was in ruins. Maintaining physical control over India was no longer viable. In 1946, London dispatched a delegation known as the Cabinet Mission to negotiate the transfer of power. But the Cabinet Mission faced an immediate logistical nightmare. How do you design a single room that accurately represents roughly 400 million people across a vast, wildly diverse subcontinent? To solve this, they implemented a strict mathematical formula. The mission mandated exactly 1 representative for every 1 million people. Applying that ratio to the population yielded a specific sum, exactly 389 total seats for the Constituent Assembly. Filtering 400 million people through this objective calculation established a bridge between a disorganized population and a formal governing body. Those 389 seats then had to be mapped onto the physical reality of the subcontinent, and as this map illustrates, India was not a single entity. It was politically fractured. The majority of the territory was known as British India, provinces under direct colonial rule. Based on their population, these regions were allocated 296 seats. The remaining area consisted of the princely states. These were semi-autonomous kingdoms run by local monarchs who paid taxes to the crown to retain their titles. Their populations earned them 93 seats. But these local monarchs had a lot to lose. Terrified a democratic constitution would strip their sovereign power and wealth, they initially boycotted the assembly. Leaving nearly a quarter of the seats empty undermined the assembly's claim to represent all of India. Without the monarch's cooperation, the map of the new nation would remain a collection of disconnected enclaves. Filling the British India seats presented another hurdle. Hosting a nationwide, universal election in 1946 was logistically impossible. Instead, the members were chosen indirectly, voted in by the politicians already sitting in the regional provincial assemblies. To guarantee minority voices would not be drowned out, these seats were legally segmented. The population was divided into 3 main demographics: Muslims, Sikhs, and the general population, with specific seat counts strictly reserved for each. They utilized a complex voting method known as proportional representation by single transferable vote. Put simply, voters ranked their candidates in order of preference. If their top choice was eliminated, their vote transferred to their second choice, ensuring that a simple majority couldn't capture every single seat in a district. The public didn't cast direct ballots, but this precise electoral math worked. It successfully channeled a wildly diverse coalition of voices, including women and representatives from marginalized castes, into the exact same room to negotiate their shared future. When the Constituent Assembly formally convened in late 1946, the political pressure was undeniable. Realizing they couldn't afford to be left out of the negotiations, the reluctant princely states finally began filling their empty seats. However, the math of the room shifted violently. The geopolitical reality of partition, which split the subcontinent into India and Pakistan, withdrew the Muslim League members. The total size of the assembly mathematically dropped from 389 down to 299. With the room settled, Jawaharlal Nehru presented a foundational document to the floor, known as the Objective Resolution. This resolution laid out a strict philosophy. It declared that India would function as an independent, sovereign republic, and explicitly stated that all power and authority of the government was derived directly from the people. This resolution acted as a binding blueprint. Every complex legal debate that followed was measured against these exact core commitments to sovereignty and popular power. For the next 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days, a drafting committee led by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar debated, revised, and translated those high-minded ideals into concrete laws. They built what remains the longest written national constitution in the world. On November 26, 1949, the Assembly officially adopted the completed text. Their primary engineering task, writing the rules of the House, was finished. But the actual enforcement began 2 months later, on January 26, 1950. On that day, the Constitution legally abolished the British Independence Act. It formally stripped the British Crown and its foreign courts of any residual jurisdiction over Indian citizens. Through careful political math, demographic engineering, and intense legal debate, the Assembly managed to gather the scattered fragments of a colonized empire. They bound them into a single, unified republic, secured entirely by the rule of law.